My name's Alex Edwards. I teach A-level history and A-level politics at Hartlepool Sixth Form. I'm just going to talk to you today a little bit about the two courses, what we study, why they're important, and what you will gain if you choose to study history or politics at Hartlepool Sixth Form. I think first it's worth saying that history and politics are two separate A-levels. I would say probably around about a quarter of my students study both history and politics, and about 3/4 study one out of the two. There's definitely benefits to taking both though. Hopefully you'll see that as we go through today. You'll get to see a little bit about the content and that sort of thing. So we'll just start off with what you study. If we start with politics, little bit of a confession. I never really know what we're going to be talking about in politics. I've been teaching the subject for 11 years now, and no 2 years are the same. Obviously, we have an exam board specification. It tells us things like we have to teach UK politics, US politics, and political ideas. So what that means is you'll get a really good overview of how the British political system works, everything from political parties to elections to parliament. We study American politics, a similar sort of setup. We look at the presidency, we look at the American Constitution, we look at how Congress works and the Supreme Court works. But within that, the conversations that we have and the sort of things that we study differ all of the time. So there's a couple of really good examples of that. I suppose the first is probably the power of the Prime Minister. Really popular topic. We always talk about what powers does the Prime Minister have, what factors might limit them, what might strengthen them. And if someone had told me this time last year, or maybe even 6 months ago, that we would be discussing the impact a global pandemic has had on Boris Johnson's power and whether that's strengthened or weakened him as a leader, I don't think I would have believed them. And I guess similarly during lockdown, we've also seen Black Lives Matter come to much more prominence. Obviously, they were around for a long time prior to that, but really they've entered national consciousness, I suppose, in the last few months. And that's had a massive impact on all kinds of different things that we study. Everything from political participation in the UK, so those protests that took place in London and around the country, to the issue of civil rights in America, through to when we do political ideas, we look at a concept called intersectionality. And the Black Lives Matter movement has added so much to all of those conversations and given us all kinds of new things to think about that we might not have thought about before, which is absolutely fascinating, really. And the truth is, I actually don't know what's going to happen over the next year. We live in such an uncertain world that anything could completely change the course of what we study in politics. That's why I love it. That's why it's so exciting. And it's why it's actually the fastest growing A-level in the country at the moment, because I think a lot of other people are also realising that. So that's just a little bit about the politics course. The history course, we're a little bit unusual here at Hartlepool because we actually let you pick which topic in history you want to study. So you get a choice between 16th century. My colleague Scott, who's the 16th century specialist, he did a Facebook Live about 3 weeks ago, I think. So if you scroll back down the feed, I'm sure you can find him and find out a little bit about 16th century. I'm a 20th century specialist. I think that's probably one of the benefits of having the two options, is that you do get teachers who are genuine specialists in the topics that they teach. And so I would teach you 20th century history. So just a little bit about the topics you'll study. So in the first year, you study 2 topics. The first is America, 1955 to 92. The focus of that is the civil rights movement, but we study also presidents, Native Americans, women, gay people, popular culture, all kinds of different topics that really affected America in that period. Really, really current, and lots, I think, where you will be able to see how America's changed since the 50s and 60s, and also ways that it hasn't really changed all that much. The second topic that we study is Britain, 1918 to 97. It's what we call a thematic study. What that means is it involves, we look at that period, that century, through the lens of different ideas and different themes. So that's everything from women, immigration, popular culture, education, health, politics, economy, all kinds of different things. There really is something for everyone, which is brilliant. You know, no matter what you're interested in, the British course will have something that engages you. If you want to be a teacher in the future, we study the history of education in Britain. If you want to be a doctor, we study the National Health Service. If you want to be a footballer, we study the development of spectator sports across the 20th century. So whatever you're interested in, you'll get to discover some of the historical context behind that, which is really, really good. In the second year, 20th century and 16th century all study the same topic, which is about the British Empire. In itself, that's really interesting, but it's also actually really current. It might not sound it, but one of the topics that we study is the history of the slave trade. And we look at all of those individuals that have been in the news recently for you know, being involved in the slave trade, and in some senses bringing a lot of wealth into Britain and being sort of glorified and honoured for that. But with hindsight, and when we look at it, when we look at the history of that, we question whether that was the right thing to do. And you know, we've seen the statues being pulled down and protests about those individuals. So you'll get to have a look at that for yourself, find out more than you just see on the news, and decide what your opinion is on it, I suppose. The other really interesting thing is, and you might not imagine this, is that while we're studying the British Empire and we look at, you know, how Britain travelled the world and the sun never set on the British Empire, we also talk about Hartlepool, because we study the development of the Royal Navy. We get ourselves a cheeky little trip out. We get ourselves down to the Royal Navy Museum, go on some boats, that kind of thing. And that's really interesting, because we get to see, while we're talking about Britain's influence around the world, we also say, well, what does this mean for the northeast of England? What does this mean for Hartlepool? I think that's something hopefully you'll find right across college. Is one of the things that we're really passionate about at Hartlepool Sixth Form College, is making sure that whatever you learn is relevant to the place where you live and the life you're going to have when you move on from us. And so the fact that we get a chance to talk in quite a lot of detail about Hartlepool and its history is something we're really proud of and we think is really important. And it's one of the reasons that we chose the British Empire topic. So that's just a little bit about the content of the two courses. I think the reason that I care so passionately about both subjects is because they work really, really well together in helping us to better understand the world that we live in. So history teaches us how we ended up here. Because the 20th century course, it's about our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, people we know, and how they shaped our lives and how they've got us to the place that we're at now. And then politics really helps us to think about where we go next and how we feel about the world that we live in today and what we would change, or if we change anything. I think if you watch the news and you just feel like you would like to know more, and you just feel like you wish you understood things better, then history and politics are definitely worth considering. Lots of our students go on to take that quite a bit further. So one of the things that we have in college is a debate team. I'm in the debate team, so it always gets a shout out in whatever I do. Debating is a fantastic skill. It teaches you to look at subjects and research them and understand them in a lot of detail, and be able to really think about arguments and how you construct arguments and how you get your point across. It's competitive, and we've competed all over the country with the debate team. Last year we were regional champions for debating matters. Unfortunately, the competition didn't really take place this year because of COVID, obviously. A few years ago, we were the Northern Sixth Form Colleges champion, which meant we were the best sixth form debate team from, I think, Lincolnshire up to the borders, Scottish borders. So it's a really, really good thing to get involved in, really exciting, it's amazing on your CV. And just if you are interested in current affairs and the world around you and social issues and that kind of thing, well, debating would be something really good to get involved with as well. Away from that, we're just generally a really active department as well. You know, we've always got lots of things going on, lots of visiting speakers. In the past, we've had Ed John Burkhold, Speaker of the House of Commons, came. Tanny Gray Thompson's paid us a visit. She's in the House of Lords. We had an American ambassador come last year to talk about her work. We also try to get trips out as much as we can. So I mentioned our trip to the Royal Navy. We also love a trip down to London to go to Parliament. And I am absolutely determined that, I don't know when it'll be now, unfortunately, I'm determined that one day I will get a trip out to Washington DC, because I think that would be absolutely amazing. So I guess the other thing that some of you might be wondering is, what can you actually study alongside history and politics, and what can you go on to do? So I think because history and politics are so relevant and so current, they work really well alongside a range of other subjects. I think probably the most common combinations are sociology, law, economics, geography, subjects that also deal with those sorts of issues and areas. And quite often we find that we're studying the same topics at the same time. So I know that when I'm teaching education in history, Rosie in sociology is often teaching education, and I know that when we study immigration and history, Liz in geography is also teaching immigration, literally the same week actually for that topic. So you get to use your knowledge and skills that you learn in one subject in another, and vice versa, and that's really good for you, and I suppose makes college a bit more interesting, a bit more exciting as well. We also find every year that we get students who take particularly history alongside sciences. So biology, chemistry, history is a really popular subject combination, and we do find that we've had quite a lot of success of students with that subject combination going on to study medicine, dentistry, pharmacy. I think having that humanities subject alongside the science background is something that universities really value. It shows that you've got another string to your bow. It shows that you've got the sort of the written skills and the verbal communication skills and all that kind of thing. So if you are interested in a career in that sort of field, then a subject like history is definitely worth considering as well. Once you leave us, the majority of students who study A-level history or A-level politics will go on to university. Around about 80% of our students go on to university. History is actually considered one of the most employable courses that you can do, because it just teaches you so many skills that that you can use in later life, that yeah, you can't really go wrong with it, in my opinion. The students who leave us to go to study history or politics are quite often a joint honours. So I have a joint honours in history and politics from Newcastle University. They've gone on to do a range of different things. We've got a lot of teachers, a lot of academics. We have some students who've gone on to be aides to members of parliament. We have students who are civil servants, political researchers, so actually directly using the topic and the contents that they've studied in their jobs. Others have used the skills that they've learned to go into things like law, journalism, medicine, all sorts of different things. Really, the possibilities are absolutely endless if you've studied history or politics. So that's just a little bit about the course. What I'll do is in the comments below, I'll put some links to our Get Ahead materials. That's got some much more detailed information about the two courses, exactly what the specification involves. It's got some little tasks that you could have a look at just to get an idea of the sort of thing that we study on the courses, just to give you a really good idea of if you think you would be interested. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free just to put them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them as best as I can. Okay, thank you very much.